control is the first mark of a powerful mind. Not control over others, that comes later, but control over the self. Most people walk through life as puppets pulled by invisible strings. Emotion, fear, validation. These forces govern their choices, warp their logic, and betray their purpose. A strong mind, however, does not allow itself to be moved by winds it cannot command. It creates a fortress of thought, disciplined, deliberate, and detached. This mind doesn't seek revenge in anger, it waits. It doesn't chase praise, it studies. It doesn't argue with fools, it observes in silence and remembers everything. The terrifying power of such a mind lies in its refusal to be reactive. The average man is predictable. Say the wrong word, and he's triggered. Insult him, he'll defend himself. Praise him, and he lowers his guard. He's not a man. He's a switch waiting to be flipped. But when you build a mind that cannot be provoked, cannot be baited, and cannot be unbalanced, you become untouchable. Not because you have no enemies, but because your enemies can't get inside. They throw dirt, and you do not blink. They question you, and you do not explain. They shout, and you listen with cold curiosity. This terrifies them, because they realize they're powerless against someone who isn't desperate to win their approval. A powerful mind sees the game beneath the noise. It knows that every insult is a test, every compliment a manipulation, every offer a transaction. It does not panic when plans fall apart because it never confuses chaos with defeat. It studies patterns, reads people like maps, and places its focus not on the loudest battle, but the one that matters most. Weak minds try to fight every fight. Strong minds choose their battlefield. They wait for the right moment to strike, and when they do, they strike with finality. There is no need to posture, to boast, or to intimidate. Presence alone is enough. You build such a mind not with comfort, but with hardship. Every time you delay gratification, you sharpen it. Every time you train it to focus when others are distracted, you strengthen it. Every time you reject an impulse, ignore an insult, or walk away from a foolish argument, you reinforce its grip. The mind, like any weapon, rusts without use and breaks without control. Most people are not dangerous because they are undisciplined. They are emotionally governed and mentally exposed. Their thoughts are public. Their reactions are readable. Their will is fragile. But a mind forged in control is impossible to map. You do not show your hand, they simply withdraw. You not flinch when provoked. You do not give them the war they want, because you're not fighting for attention. You're building a throne they can't reach. Control is the beginning of every empire. It is not about domination over others. It's about refusing to be ruled from within. Most minds are obsessed with being understood. They crave validation like a dog begs for scraps. They want the world to approve of their ambition, their pain, their purpose. But the stronger the mind becomes, the more it abandons this addiction. Needing to be understood is a form of slavery. Because once you depend on others to grasp your truth, you have handed them the authority to define your worth. The terrifying mind operates beyond that. It does not explain. It does not justify. It moves in silence and lets results speak in thunder. It does not beg to be seen clearly, because it understands that clarity in the eyes of the masses is a myth built on convenience and fear. They will distort your strength to protect their weakness. They will twist your silence into arrogance. They will call your focus cold and your discipline obsessive, and you must let them, because their opinions are not your concern. They are your camouflage. There is power in being unreadable. When they don't know what drives you, they cannot control you. When they don't know what you feel, they cannot weaponize it. When they don't understand your mind, they fear it. People do not fear monsters they recognize. They fear the ones they can't predict. They fear the shadows. They fear the quiet figure who says little but moves with precision. They fear what operates beyond their emotional range. And so the terrifying mind becomes unknowable not by accident, but by design. It is deliberate in its distance. It chooses what to reveal and what to withhold. It knows that in a world obsessed with broadcasting, silence is power. To be misunderstood is not failure. It is armor, because the crowd will always try to turn confidence into arrogance, strength into cruelty, focus into detachment. They need to label you so they can feel comfortable dismissing you. But when you give them nothing to grasp, when you refuse to explain your every move, they are left with their own reflection. And most cannot stand to see themselves through the silence of someone who does not need their acceptance. This is how the strong mind separates itself. It operates from a different altitude. It doesn't descend to be liked. It doesn't bend to be accepted. It doesn't trade truth for applause. Most people can't stand the thought of being disliked. They mold themselves into whatever shape the room demands. But that flexibility is weakness in disguise. It makes you a servant of perception. The terrifying mind, on the other hand, is carved from purpose. It is indifferent to popularity because it understands the cost. Every great move comes with misinterpretation. Every act of truth will provoke the insecure. If you need them to understand you, you'll make yourself small enough for them to grasp. And once you do that, you're no longer in control. You've surrendered the architecture of your mind for a temporary nod of approval. The terrifying mind walks alone, not because it has no allies, but because it refuses to need an audience. The most dangerous mind is the one that does not speak when expected. While others shout to prove their worth, this mind sits in silence, watching, recording, calculating. It learns in the background while others expose themselves in loud desperation. The weak mistake stillness for weakness. They don't realize that the sharpest blade is often the one kept sheathed. Power isn't always loud. It's patient. It gathers intelligence. It reads rooms, not to blend in, but to dominate later. People don't understand the weapon of observation because they're too busy reacting. They're caught in the habit of explaining themselves, justifying themselves, expressing every emotional tremor, as if anyone listening truly cares. The terrifying mind rejects the compulsion. It knows that knowledge is more dangerous than noise. When you observe long enough, you begin to see beneath the surface. You hear the lie inside the compliment. You catch the hesitation before betrayal. You notice the insecurity disguised as arrogance. Silence reveals what noise hides, but only if you train your mind to listen. Not just to what is said, but what isn't. What people avoid, what they exaggerate, what they repeat. That is where the truth lives. And when you become the one in the room who listens more than they speak, people grow nervous. Not because you threaten them openly, but because they can't figure you out. You become a mirror to their own discomfort. They sense that you know more than you say, and that terrifies them. Speaking less is not about being shy. It's about being in control. It's about knowing that every word you release is a resource. And the more you speak, the more you spend. A strong mind treats speech like currency. It doesn't waste it on people who haven't earned it. Every sentence is calculated. Every pause is a weapon. When you finally do speak, your words hit harder because they're rare. When you move, your actions carry weight because they're precise. You've built anticipation, and anticipation is power. People reveal everything when they think you're not a threat. They talk too much, share too freely, trust too easily. And you, the silent mind, learn how the world operates. You see the strategies behind the smiles. You map the alliances. You memorize the emotional patterns of your opponents. Observation becomes your superpower, and silence your cloak. When others finally realize what you are, it's too late. By then, you've already studied their weaknesses. They simply withdraw, dismantle the defenses, and prepared your strategy. You don't walk into battles you haven't already won in your mind. A terrifying mind doesn't need to announce its presence. It radiates control in the way it listens. It creates discomfort in its stillness. It exposes truth simply by existing. The world expects noise, expects distraction, expects outbursts. So when you walk in with the discipline to say nothing, to observe everything, to calculate instead of react, you become a disruption in the pattern. And patterns, once disrupted, break down. The terrifying mind becomes the architect of that breakdown. It knows that the loudest in the room rarely holds the power. The one who listens does. The mind that bends the crowd is already broken. Most people fear standing alone because they confuse isolation with weakness. But the terrifying mind understands that true strength is forged in solitude. The ability to think without interference, to see without distortion, to choose without consensus. That is what separates the masters from the masses. The herd survives by merging into each other, by echoing familiar beliefs, by hiding inside shared fear. But the one who stands apart becomes dangerous because they no longer require agreement. They don't think with borrowed ideas. They don't chase approval. They observe the crowd not to belong, but to understand how to move beyond it. There is a price for independent thought. You will be misunderstood. You will be called arrogant, stubborn, cold. But the terrifying mind accepts this. It prefers clarity over comfort. The truth is rarely welcome in rooms that run on delusion, and those who speak it without apology will always be labeled a threat. The strong mind does not resist this. It welcomes it. Because if your words don't provoke, your mind probably doesn't matter. Thinking for yourself means risking isolation. It means leaving the safety of collective emotion to walk the path of individual reason. It means losing the applause of the many to earn the fear of the few. The crowd changes its opinion like the wind. They worship you when you succeed, crucify you when you fail, forget you when you're silent, and hate when you're unmoved. Basing your mind on such a foundation is a recipe for ruin. The terrifying mind isn't looking for admiration. It's focused on control. It's building an internal fortress where no insult, no betrayal, no rejection can breach. When you can sit in the silence, endure the loneliness, and remain unshaken in your logic, you become something else entirely. Something the crowd can't understand. Something they fear because they can't influence. Most people outsource their thinking. They let media shape their values. They let trends define their identity. They change who they are depending on who's watching. But the terrifying mind is sovereign. It doesn't wait for the world to catch up. It doesn't ask for permission. It simply moves and the world reacts. This kind of mental independence is a threat to systems built on obedience. It cannot be bought with likes or bent with shame. It has severed the need to be liked. And without that chain, it becomes capable of doing what others only dream of. Living with ruthless purpose. The strong mind doesn't just tolerate being alone. It trains in it. Solitude becomes the gym where it sharpens itself. No distractions, no validations, just truth, repetition, and focus. It understands that only in isolation can a mind fully meet itself. The herd dilutes, the crowd confuses. But when it's just you, your thoughts, and your strategy, the mind has room to grow teeth. The terrifying mind doesn't seek company. It becomes the kind of force people seek, but never own. A mind that seeks strength for its own sake will eventually fracture. But a mind that builds itself with purpose becomes something else entirely. Useful, then indispensable, then untouchable. Most people remain replaceable because they never commit to mastery. They touch everything and master nothing. They try to be everything to everyone and end up as no one of significance. But the terrifying mind chooses a path and burns every other bridge. It goes so deep into one domain that it becomes a pillar, not a pawn. First, you make yourself useful. That means knowing more than others are willing to learn, doing what others avoid, showing up when others rest. It means developing skills that can't be ignored, even by those who dislike you. Usefulness makes you necessary, and necessity is power. But usefulness is just the beginning. Indispensability comes when people realize they cannot operate without your presence or your mind. They rely on your clarity, your judgment, your execution. They begin to structure their moves around your actions. At this point, they simply withdraw. You've gone from being a worker being a strategist. You're not just solving problems, you're shaping direction. This level of mental power makes people uncomfortable because it makes them dependent. They see that while others speak of vision, you build systems. While others drown in problems, you've already prepared the solutions. The terrifying mind isn't content with being respected. It wants to be necessary, because necessity gives leverage. And with leverage, you don't have to ask, you dictate. Then comes the final stage, untouchable. This isn't about arrogance or isolation. It's about positioning. You've built something so solid that no single person, threat, or opinion can break you. Your skill is rare. Your presence is calculated. You've removed emotion from decision-making, and that alone makes you a force others fear to cross. They simply withdraw. Unshakable doesn't mean you're immune to attacks. It means their attacks have no effect. It means you've designed your life and your mind in such a way that removal is no longer an option for those who need what you bring. You've turned your mind into a weapon that can't be stolen and a resource that can't be replaced. To reach this level, comfort must be your enemy. There is no growth in being liked. There is no transformation in being safe. You must be willing to outwork, outthink, outlast everyone in the room without needing them to clap. You train when no one sees. You study when no one cares. You discipline your habits until the results are no longer surprising. They are inevitable. Most people want to be celebrated before they've earned respect. They want recognition before they've built value. The terrifying mind doesn't seek either. It becomes undeniable. It shows up, solves problems, predicts threats, and disappears without applause. And eventually, the room learns to wait for its opinion before making a move. That's when you know you've crossed the line from useful to untouchable. You don't need to roar to be feared. You don't need to beg to be seen. The most terrifying mind is the one that moves with ruthless clarity, unshaken by noise, unbound by emotion, untouched by the need to be understood. It walks alone not because it lacks allies, but because it answers only to purpose. It trains in silence. It learns through pain. It sharpens itself against rejection, isolation, and failure. And when it steps into the world, it doesn't ask for respect. It commands it through action, precision, and presence. This mind is not a product of chance. It is built brick by brick through control, observation, independence, discipline, and usefulness. It does not wait for the world to allow it to rise. It rises and the world adjusts. Be that mind. Let them fear the silence before you speak. Let them feel your presence before you move. Build a mind so strong it does not need to be defended, only witnessed.